World Council of Churches, and obviously I was hyped for this episode. I mean, last week's episode just set the bar so high, and it really did seem like after such a, slower type season that's been a lot of build-up and not a ton of payoff, it's been a lot of setting up things, which again, I think they've done a really good job with. It really did seem like we were getting closer to that, and while I do think this episode was just a bit of a step down from last week, but I really think anything would have been. I mean, last week's episode, like I said, just set the bar so high. I still really did love this episode. I am extremely excited to see where we're going. I'm also very worried as to where we're going because of how dark I think things are about to get and how threatening this is really going to get to Philip and Elizabeth, but I really think a lot of things are about to change dramatically for this show, but let's just get into this episode because I definitely do want to get into it, and most of this episode focused on the relationships with Philip and Elizabeth, but mainly the relationships that they have with their kids, whether it be their actual kids or their fictitious child or people who are kids. It really did focus a lot on that, and I thought that was something that was very well done here. So immediately, we start off with Paige. She's on her way home, and Pastor Tim then corners her and announces that he and his wife are moving to Buenos Aires to come to work on a peace mission. And Paige, I think, did a really good job with her poker face here, looking like she had no idea what he's talking about, and looking... Obviously, it's a bit bittersweet for her. Like, deep down, it is definitely bittersweet. But she played it as if she had no idea. So they say their goodbyes. The pastor's excited for his daughter Clara to see the world. And I thought she'd do a good job with that. So Paige heads home and tells her parents, Philip and Elizabeth, that Tim accepted the job and he's leaving. And she quizzes her parents about how they were able to get the job for Pastor Tim. Like, how were they able to do this so easily? It just seems like it was kind of, impossible to do. We know, obviously, what the center wants, the center gets. So how are they able to do this? And basically, it's hard to tell if she's really upset or relieved about this, which I thought was interesting. You really don't know how Paige is really interpreting this. Me, personally, I think Paige is a bit upset, obviously. I mean, she was so into the religion, and this is something that she really did believe in. But unfortunately, because of what her family partakes in, that really does come in competition with that, and that really does take principle over everything. And I think Paige is just realizing that a lot of her beliefs and a lot of the things that she has believed in throughout her life, she unfortunately does need to get rid of, which is really sad, but I think it's just kind of the reality of the situation. And we get this really kind of devastating scene where she tosses this necklace that Tim gave her in the trash, and Elizabeth actually does fish it out, which again really does show Elizabeth's progression. This is not something Elizabeth would have done 2 seasons ago, but she tells Paige that she has to wear the necklace until the pastor is gone, just so she can keep up the act, make it seem like she can, she actually does want the pastor to still be there, and so they can continue keeping up appearances. But as we know, Paige, we can tell, is definitely not happy with the way this is going, but unfortunately, she doesn't really have a say here, and I do think it's very sad to see how outnumbered she is, but I think at the same time, Paige is kind of realizing that this isn't her fight, and the best thing to do is kind of just play along at this point. So we then go to Moscow with Oleg, and holy shit, I mean, I know I've said before that I think that Oleg, all that he's doing, it's only temporal, but this really is starting to become a problem, because we see he's really in hot water here. He's dragged, down to headquarters, and he knows obviously what this is all about, but he has to keep this, he has to be under the guise that he has no idea what they're talking about, and that he is innocent. He has to keep playing that card as much as he can, even though you can tell it's becoming harder and harder for him to do, because they question about Stan and Nina. He claims he had no involvement with Stan, that he doesn't have a relationship with Stan, he's not even his friend or anything, and that he had no idea what was going on between him and Nina. Obviously, all things we know are not true. Him and Stan are a lot closer now. Stan is basically the reason why Oleg's still there. I mean, if Stan wanted to push for Oleg, Oleg would have gone out by now, and they have intel that Stan's now working with an illegal named Tatiana, and obviously they know that this is something that, that they obviously know that this is illegal what Stan is doing, and Oleg insists that he and Stan are not friends, and he has no idea what Stan's up to now. Now, that part is true. That is the only part of this that really is true, that Stan, you know, in reality, he has no idea what Stan's really up to. Stan's been doing all this stuff without him, and that's the one thing that he can genuinely say, that is actually true. That, yeah, he has no idea what Stan has been doing this entire time. I do think that's going to change. I think he is definitely going to get out of Moscow at some point, but, he really doesn't have any idea what Stan is doing. So back in the U.S., we see Stan and Adderholt. They get a shock. They head to the safe house to meet up with Sophia, of course, that being the illegal they're talking about, and they're shocked when she walks in with a man, and this scene is just so thrilling. I mean, there's something about this man that just sets us off. Like, he doesn't look like this is someone that they should trust, and she introduces him as Gennady and reveals that they're getting married. Now, we don't know who this man is, but he's just randomly come up here, and apparently she told him all about her arrangement with the FBI, and he wants to be paid as well. And he's like, look, you can trust me, I'm a good guy, you know, I'm not going to double cross you or anything, I will stay firmly on your side. And they're speechless about this, because she told him everything. I mean, he now knows about her arrangement, and they are surprised that she was able to get this guy in, and, now Stan and Adderholt have a lot more to deal with now, because it's one thing to protect one woman and keep the FBI out of it. It's another to tell two, and I don't know if this is really going to work out for them. I think this has become a much bigger situation than they thought it was, and I mean, I never really thought this was going to go well for Stan, but I never anticipate to get to this level. I mean, this is definitely, this is not going to end up well at all, and this could end up, you know, having huge insurmountable consequences on them, and I just don't know if this is really going to work for them. So, Philip and Elizabeth then meet with Claudia. They drop a bomb on her immediately and reveal that they're considering ending their tour in the U.S. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, they're not going back to Russia. This episode confirms that's the case. I mean, they talk about going back to Moscow, and they want to head home, and Claudia tells them that when they're ready, she will have the center get the paperwork to her. She basically doesn't have a choice here. Like, she's okay with it. And I think she knows, you know, that the center doesn't want it, but at the same time, can she really blame them? I mean, Gabriel just left. Why shouldn't they? And Claudia warns them it will be a tough adjustment for the kids. And I think that's kind of why she's agreeing to it, because she knows what impact this is going to have on the kids who really have no idea of what they're getting themselves into. I mean, Moscow's not exactly better. We've seen Moscow is a hell of a lot worse, honestly. You can understand why Philip and Elizabeth want to go back there, but the fact of the matter is that things are not better, and I think that's something that Philip and Elizabeth are going to quickly realize once we get there next season, because I think this episode definitely confirms that no matter what, we are definitely heading to Russia next season. So back in Moscow, Oleg learns that a woman he was working with was arrested and that the prosecutor needs official statements from him, and he's a little upset because he promised her if she cooperated with them, she wouldn't be arrested, and obviously that's not the case. She clearly has not cooperated with them, and he goes out on a limb for her. He's doing anything he can to try to defend her and make sure that that arrest doesn't happen, and he tries to explain to his boss that the woman isn't crucial to their investigation, but who knows if he can actually trust this woman. I mean, it seems that he thinks things are okay there, but who knows if this is actually going to work out for him. I don't really know if it's going to work out. We'll have to see really how that's going to go, but I'm very doubtful of what's really going to happen for Oleg. I just don't really know if this is going to work out well for him. Again, there's only so much he can do with keeping up appearances, and I think that's been one of the major themes this season, is keeping up appearances, and that's something that Oleg has really been doing all season, and I just don't think he's going to be able to for that much longer. So Elizabeth then puts on this guy. She heads over to the Morozov house, and I was dead wrong, guys. I mean, I know I said I thought we were done with the Morozovs. This episode confirms that's not the case. The Morozovs are still, in fact, in America. They have not left yet, and clearly, you know, Alexei's wife did not listen to Tatiana's request at all. I mean, Tatiana, I think she was good with what she said. Like, she tried to appeal to her and tell her, look, everything's fine, you know, you should leave for these reasons, for this and this and this, and this is why you should leave, and they'll have a better life there. But she did not listen to her. And while she and Pasha's mother are outside cutting out coupons, Pasha rushes in the front door and upstairs with a black eye, and his mom then confesses to Elizabeth that school has been brutal on Pasha, and it looks like Tuan's bullying tactics are really starting to work. And we know, obviously, you can tell Tuan throughout this episode, he doesn't want to have to do this. Like, he doesn't want to have to pick on Pasha like this, but because of the fact this family, they need to try to wrap this up in as best a way as possible and keep themselves out of it and not make it seem like it was their idea and not theirs. They have to do whatever they can to try to get them to leave. And basically, Pasha's mom says that she has been begging Alexei to move their family back to Russia, and Elizabeth heads over to the safe house to check. Excuse me. She heads over to the safe house to check in on Tuan, and she says that the bullying doesn't really seem to be convincing Alexei to move his family back home. Unfortunately, he's not budging. They're going to come up with a new plan because nothing really seems to be working here. And again, I like that this isn't working for them. I like that they do have to rethink what they really want to do. I mean, obviously, yes, you want things to go well for them, and you want them to be able to safely, conclude this, but there's only just so much they can do here, and I just don't know if this is really going to work out for them. So basically, we then see in Moscow, we see Stern and his partner, they head back to the FBI office, and they fill their boss in on Sofia and Gennady, and Stan's worried that her cover is blown, and the Soviets sent in Gennady to manipulate the situation, and we know that the FBI has had his back throughout all this. Again, they wanted Oleg, but because of how convincing Stan was, they did do that, and he thinks that Sofia may be in serious trouble. He really doesn't think that Gennady is good for Sofia, and that Sofia could possibly end up dying here, which would really be bad, not just for her, but for Stan. I mean, again, the FBI, was just, they were relentless about Oleg, and this was the one way that Stan could try to, direct Oleg away from the situation, and this is how he did it. And unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like this is, going to work exactly, it doesn't really seem like this is really going to work for that much longer. Again, you want this to go well for Stan, but there's only so much he can do here. And now that we have Gennady, I'm really not convinced that Gennady is in favor of what they're doing. I think he is, in fact, someone who's a lot more dangerous than he seems. And especially what we get in the promo next week, I am definitely not convinced that Gennady is, serious in this whole thing with Sofia as he seems. So then we get something that was really surprising in this episode, is that we see the return of Misha here, which I was really surprised about. I knew he was going to come back in the picture, but I completely forgot about him, honestly, because of how much we haven't been seeing him since that 6th episode. That was the last time we really heard about Misha, but I did like getting to see him again here, because, again, it is a big plot thread that the show is going to tie up at the end, and I like, again, something the Americans always does well is when you think a plot's over, it's not. This is a very good example of that. We see he's back to work in a factory. Everything's kind of back to normal for him. His supervisor takes him aside and tells him that he has a visitor, and the mystery man is then waiting for him outside the building, and he announces something that's very interesting. He's actually Misha's father's brother, we find out, and this is very intriguing, because who else is in Moscow? Oleg, and, if Misha's in Moscow and also Oleg's in Moscow, that does not seem very coincidental. I mean, it seems that we are leading towards that twist, and I know a lot of people have said, that's insane, there's no way that Oleg could be Phil's father, it's a bit of a stretch, his brother, it's a bit of a stretch, but who else could this possibly be? I mean, who else do we know that's in Moscow that's a mystery man? And, better, why do we care? Like, who else do we really care about that could possibly be Philip's brother? I think it's Oleg. I think Oleg knows he's Philip's brother. He's going to try to lead Misha to Philip, and I think that's how we're really going to jumpstart this plot next season, because one thing's for sure, Philip's got to find out eventually, and Misha's got to get to Philip. I mean, it's going to happen next season. It's inevitable, and I think Oleg is really going to be his way back to Philip. So again, I know that I sound crazy, but I don't think I sound crazy now. I mean, who else is in Moscow? Who else is in Moscow that could convincingly be like, oh, I'm, your father's father's brother. Who else could it possibly be? It has to be Oleg, and if that's the case, I am definitely very interested in seeing where we're going. So Elizabeth and Philip are then very worried about the kids, knowing their situation and what they're going to have to do. Obviously, it's a lot to put on a child, to have to tell them, oh, look, you got to give your entire life and we're going to, Russia. And they sit down with Pastor Tim, and they tell him that they're thinking about moving back home, but they're very worried about Paige and Henry because it seems like they want advice. And I like that they went to someone who they normally wouldn't go to for. I mean, we know throughout the entire show that they have been very much against Pastor Tim's practicings because they just don't believe in his religious, they don't have that religious belief, and that's something that Pastor Tim has always kind of tried to push them towards, to having that religious belief and to focusing more on that kind of thing, but that's something that Elizabeth and Philip just haven't really done, and I like that they did try to go to him, hoping that maybe he could push them in that more religious direction, because obviously he hasn't, and they then head home, and they find that Henry and his girlfriend has spent the afternoon making the family dinner, and this is definitely Henry's girlfriend. I know he says, oh, Chris is not my girlfriend. No, she definitely is after this episode. There's no way that she isn't, and definitely, I really did enjoy what we saw here. I like the scene between, Henry, how he made them dinner and everything, and he really is explaining them how this dinner works. And again, it just shows how normal this all is for Henry. Again, to Henry, his family's completely normal. He doesn't really think much of them, and I'm definitely interested in seeing really what's going to happen there. So, later that night, Paige then quizzes her parents about their names, and she's shocked to learn her parents' names, and everything that's going on there. And Philip and Elizabeth Jennings, we find out, were actually names that the center took from dead Americans. Those were actual people. But obviously they're not now, and Phillips confesses that he does miss, the name Misha, because that is his real name, and he does definitely miss it. But that's who they are now. They now are Philip and Elizabeth, and that's been a big part of the show, is just seeing the transformation in them from going to people who have been assigned to play this role and actually now are, in fact, these people. They really have transformed into Philip and Elizabeth Jennings, and I think that's something that was very powerful here. Again, it was a scene that could have just been not, anything, but it really played a bigger role here because it really just showed the transformation that these two have gone through, and I definitely really did like seeing that. So we see Misha, Philip's brother takes him home, and it's definitely not Oleg, it actually is his brother, Peter, something like that. He takes Misha home with him to meet his wife and kids. They sit down for dinner, they're getting to know each other, and it's a good scene. I mean, we know that Misha hasn't really had a lot in his life. If I remember, he was... his mother has just died, and he has met someone who's in his lineage. It's just not the person that he wants to meet yet. And I think Peter, if Philip goes to Moscow, he's going to find out a lot about Philip, and I think definitely he's going to lead him to Philip. So I think this is definitely going to be the journey there. And again, I like seeing this reemergence of the plot here. I like that the show didn't just forget it. A lesser show would have done that, but I like that the show didn't do that here. So Philip and Elizabeth then put on their disguises, they head out, and in the car they talk about moving back to Russia. And it sounds like Philip is really having second thoughts. He's worried about how the kids are really going to adjust. Are they really willing to put aside their entire lives for this? The thing is, Paige's life is already destroyed either way, so there's really not much they can do here. Henry seems to have it great, and they don't just want to take that away from him. And you can tell he really, especially in the beginning of the episode, mind you, he thought the kids were completely fine with it. I don't know why, but he thought they would be fine. And they head to the safe house to meet with Swan, and Swan is thrilled. He says that he has good news, and apparently he convinced Pasha to slit his wrists and fake a suicide attempt in a ploy to get his parents' attention and convince Alexei to move home, which is insane to think about that he actually did this, but that's what he wants Pasha to do. Now, he's convinced that Pasha won't cut an artery, but Philip and Elizabeth tell him very quickly, no, this is obviously not what you should be doing. I mean, this is going way too far, and they're scared that Pasha is going to end up dead, and if that happens, then again, this entire mission is just crumbled, and they've already... they've already killed someone unjustly, and that it was someone that was completely innocent. They don't want to have to do that again. They don't want to be held accountable for anything else, and they tell Swan to call Pasha and tell him to not go through with it, and unfortunately, there's no answer at the house, and I love the way this episode ends. sequence where Philip runs out to this door down the street to Pasha's house, doing literally whatever he can to get through to Pasha. He will make sure that Pasha does not kill himself. And Elizabeth and Swan then chase after him. They march right past the car with an FBI agent sitting in it that has been watching the house, and we realize that there is an FBI that could possibly expose them, and that is the way this episode ends. Really thrilling stuff overall, but let's just get this episode and where we're going for what is sure to be a riveting finale. So, holy shit, guys. I mean, the possibilities of what can really go down next week are really endless here. And there are so many things that have very well led us up here. Again, a lot of people have said that this season hasn't really been about the mission, and yeah, no, it hasn't. The season has been a much more character-driven type season. The show in general is a character-driven show, but compared to last season, this has definitely been a lot more character-driven. The mission itself hasn't been a big part of the season because it hasn't really been a big part of Philip and Elizabeth's life. They're starting to become more and more detached to it, and the whole thing of the whole food shortage thing and the whole, like, you know, who's poisoning the food, we haven't focused on that a lot because it just hasn't been a major thing for Philip and Elizabeth. But that was kind of the catalyst for all of this. I think that was really to show that they've already screwed things up. They already got that mission wrong. They've tried to reroute it as best as they can, but we know they can't do that. They have to accept what they've done, and they have to just kind of deal with the mission as is. And if Pasha dies, that ruins everything for them. There's no guarantee they're going to... There's no chance they're going to get to Russia if that happens. There's no chance they're going to get out of this potentially, you know, safe. And now the FBI is on their tail. There's definitely a risk that they could come out of this red-handed. And again, I think that Stan is finding out in this last episode. I think it only makes sense for him to find out at the end of the season. He doesn't know yet, and he's been kept away from the main narrative a lot, but because the FBI is after Phil and Elizabeth, you know Stan will also be after them, and he has kind of been on this discovery of who is that couple, you know, Russian couple that he's been searching for, so I think he definitely is going to get closer to that. If he doesn't find out next week, it's going to be in the last season, obviously, but I really do hope he finds out next week. I think it makes the most sense for them to do that, and we'll have to see how that really does go down. Surprisingly, though, that is the thing that I'm least interested in. I loved what we got there, don't get me wrong, but the whole Stan finding out, it's great. It really is, and I think it's going to be incredible when he does eventually find out. But because of how great everything else is, it's the thing I'm least interested in happening. It's the thing that I, you know, definitely least speculating about. The one thing I really do want to talk about is, do you think Phil and Elizabeth are really going to move back to Russia? I mean, think about it. They have literally destroyed their daughter's life. When she's throwing that cross away, that's not because she's not religious anymore. It's to rid herself and pretend the situation never happened and basically make it seem like the last 3 years of her life have been completely pointless. All the recreational stuff she's done, all the stuff she's done for, like, charities and shit like that, all of that's gone because now she has to just be a full-time spy. And again, I don't think it's what she really wants to do, but she's kind of in this situation where she can't really do anything else, and it makes sense why Paige isn't really retaliating here. She's kind of just accepting the way things are, and she can't really say no at this point. I mean, she's so deep into this operation that saying no at this point wouldn't make any sense for her to do, and would be a significant loss if she did do that. So she really doesn't have much of a choice but to say yes, unfortunately, and you gotta feel bad for Paige. Again, no child should have to endure the amount of stress that she's gone through, and Henry at this point, he is the normal one. He's the one who seems like, you know, everything's fine. You know, he's got this great girl, he's setting the table for his parents, and it just shows how content he is with life, something that really none of these characters really are. He's the only character in this show that's not running for his life and hasn't been having anything to hide. He's the only character that hasn't had to do that. Even Stan has had to do that this season, and I feel like that's something that the show has shown very well, is that all these characters really do have masks, except for Henry. Henry kind of is the Trojan horse in this situation, will you? And I think it definitely is going to change. I think Henry is going to find out what's going to happen, and I don't know if he's really going to, though, because again, do Philip and Elizabeth care enough? I mean, I don't know if he's really going to find out. I think they definitely care about Henry, but is he really going to find out? I don't know. We'll have to see really how that goes down. As far as Oleg, like I said, there's no way in hell that Oleg is going to be able to continue what he's doing. I mean, it's just getting more and more risky for him that I don't know if he's going to be able to continue doing this, and I don't know if he's getting out of the season alive. I really don't. I don't know if he's going to be able to protect this woman. He's been doing all he can for that. The FBI are not done with him. I mean, he still does have people on his tail, and I think he definitely is going to be held accountable at the end of the day for what he's done. What he's done is illegal, and he knows that, but there's only so long that he can go with what he's doing. And then as far as Stan, this is obviously a very dangerous situation because not only do they have Sophia, who is in fact an illegal, and who the FBI have been using to their advantage, but now they have this other man who they obviously don't really trust, and I don't blame them. I mean, he just seems very shady. All of a sudden, Gennady has just kind of come out of nowhere, and they obviously don't trust him just for the reason that they have no idea where he's from. I mean, he just kind of appeared, and they don't really know what's going to happen there, so we'll have to see the way that really goes down. And as far as Misha, I don't know if Philip's finding out in the finale. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think that is very well setting up for next season. I think we're going to see Peter, he's going to lead Misha to Philip in some way, and I think definitely we're going to get some sort of resolution there. Either way, guys, this episode did an incredible job of really setting the stakes for next week's finale. This was an episode that was a bit of a step down just because of how great this season has really been. This was definitely a bit of a step down, but I still really did love this episode, and I'm still, at the end of the day, giving the Americans Season 5, Episode 12, The World Council of Churches, a 4 out of 5 or a B+. So over, guys, for this episode, The Americans. How much you guys thought of this episode overall? Left your thoughts on it. I am so hyped for next week's finale. It might be the most insane finale this show has done. I mean, especially from that promo, I think that's exactly what we're getting here. This is going to be an insane finale. There's going to be possibly a lot of casualties, and I think a lot of stuff is going to turn out a lot messier than Philip and Elizabeth had hoped it is. And I think, you know, that's the best thing for the show. It's not the best thing for them, obviously, but it makes for really great TV, and I can't wait to see the way that all really does go down. But I can't believe next week's a finale either. The season is always, I always say it every season, the show always flies by, but this season especially really has. But that's my review. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for the season finale of Arrow, which I am so hyped for, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.